2, 3. This time of day, everything's okay. I take a long look around, I have to say, this time of year, it becomes clear.
Hello, welcome to Your Friends and Neighbors. My name, of course, is Willie Jones. If you've been watching Your Friends and Neighbors, as I'm sure you have been, I think you know my name by now. But if not, yes, I am William and Aaron Patrick Jones. And I hope you are surviving this weather. Oh my God, it has been so cold. I know by the time this gets on the air, which will probably be in a few more days, I think we're still going to be under a lot of cold weather. And so I feel like I should have an oil man sitting or standing outside my house just pouring the oil in. I mean, just stand there and pour it in, because man, this weather is wreaking havoc on the oil bill. So, just hang in there. Spring will be coming. Don't, Puxatawny Phil, I know, I'm tired of him anyway. So, well, we have an interesting guest today. This person is used to interviewing people, and it's my turn today to interview him. And my guest is a reporter from the Bennington Banner. His name is Derek Carson. And welcome, Derek, to
Thank
Your
you.
Friends and Neighbors.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, that's great. Actually, Derek's girlfriend, Beck Lenve, sorry, I always want to say Lenve, she works here at Cat TV, and she's been a great addition to the studio. So it's kind of nice. We've had we've had her here at Cat TV for a while. Now we get a little chance to find out more about Derek. We found out a little bit about Beck, and maybe I should get her in here and find out more about her. So before we talk about you coming to Bennington and becoming the Banner reporter for the Banner, tell us a little bit about your background, growing up, where you went to school, different things like that.
Sure.
Things you're interested in.
All right, I'll do my best.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Auburn, Massachusetts, which is just south of Worcester.
Okay.
Directly south of Worcester, in fact.
Okay.
We're about 5 minutes away from the city, very suburban. It actually has roughly the same population as Bennington, but the atmosphere of the town is very, very different.
Okay.
So that's where I grew up. It's a town of about 15,000. I went to school at UMass Amherst. I studied journalism. I always knew I liked to write. That was never a question. And I think it was around freshman year of high school, one of my teachers said, "You really should consider writing. This is very good stuff." And
Yeah.
I always saw myself writing fiction, but it's a very difficult industry to get into. So when I was trying to decide college majors, things like that, journalism appealed to me because it would give me an opportunity to write every day, to practice, and then maybe I could write it on the side, eventually become a novelist who wrote fiction, that type of thing. So it was almost a way to get into that field. As I went to the UMass Amherst and I studied journalism more and more, I really fell in love with just the idea of telling people's stories and all of that, so the career really started to appeal to me. It started maybe as a fallback plan,
Right.
but it was something I really had interest in and wanted to continue.
Do you still have that writing ambition that someday I am going to write the great American novel, or at least a novel?
I would certainly love that, and I still do write creatively from time to time. It's hard when you're writing several thousand words a day for your job to then have the motivation to write, but on the weekends and things, I'll do a little creative writing, see what I can come up with. I've participated in National Novel Writing Month a few times, which the idea is you have 1 month, it's usually in November, to write, I believe it's a 50,000 word novel. So not very long, or not as long as novels go, but it's a challenge. I've never finished.
Like a novella. It's shorter than a novella, I guess.
Yeah, it's not super long, but the idea is that
It's a challenge.
you just put your words on paper.
Yeah.
And I've done that a few times, and it's fun. So yes, I would say that I still have that ambition.
And then do they respond to your writing and tell you, what they liked about it or what you should
Well, I
work
don't know.
on,
I've
or-
never finished.
Oh, you haven't finished?
Yeah, if I can actually finish,
Oh.
I'm never satisfied with my writing. That's one of the problems.
Oh, okay, that's like an artist. They think, you say, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, it's not done yet. What? It looks done to me. But
Exactly.
They always have that one last touch they want to.
A month is a very short amount of time to actually take even a novella, and make it truly what you want it to be. So I've never truly been satisfied.
Right, not like Charlie Brown, where and the very, 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 whatever, however, they always added that very. So it was just fiction, not poetry or anything like that? Are you interested in that too? Or?
I've never been into poetry. I wouldn't say just fiction, however, because I'm very interested in history and nonfiction.
Oh, okay.
Or even historical fiction, if we
Yeah.
were to blend the two.
Right.
Since I've come to Bennington, for example, I really love the Historical Society puts on talks up at the museum. I've become really interested in the history of Bennington, for example. So maybe that would be a thing to write about someday. The town has such an amazing history.
Yeah. So what brought you to Bennington? Why? How did you end up at the Bennington Banner?
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah,
because
okay.
newspapers in general aren't really hiring right now.
Yeah,
At all.
It's hard. Yeah.
And to get into the online journalism business, often you have to work for free for a while, see how many web hits you can. It's not really fair to people who have just graduated college. You basically have to support yourself by other means while you're trying to further your journalism career. It can be very difficult. I applied to papers all across New England with openings, and a few on the West Coast as well.
Okay.
I really did spread my feelers far and wide.
Would have been a little warmer than it is right now here.
Oh, yeah, probably. But the first one that got back to me for an interview, this was probably about 6 months after I graduated college, was the Banner. And I came up here for an interview, and the Catamount Prowl was going on at the time.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Oh,
this would have been about June 2013.
Okay.
So I did the interview. I met Michelle, who's the editor at the Banner. I really liked the town. I spent the afternoon walking around. I ate pizza at Ramunto's, just trying to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear back for quite some time. It was a few months actually before Michelle called me and offered me the job. And I was, oh, Bennington, yeah. And I was still interested in the town. I thought it was neat. I had checked out Fiddlehead. That was an example, one of the cultural things that. Because previously I'd lived in the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts, where Northampton, all of that. It's a very flourishing arts community, and I saw some of that in Bennington, and I thought it might be an interesting place to live. And so when she offered me the job, I didn't need to think very long. I accepted it.
And you talk about arts. Yes, the Bennington area and all the surrounding communities, going into Massachusetts and New York too, there's just a plethora of artists, of musicians and art and drama. And we are so lucky to, and I'm so happy to, sorry, Ryan, so happy to be a member of Old Castle Theater since 1987. It is flourishing. And I have to admit, when the Banner had the big change and everything like that, I did write a letter to the Banner saying that I wish when they did the arts and entertainment, I did wish that they could spend a little more time writing about Bennington and different things like that. And I know they were going through a hard time then. They were changing everything around and different things like that. So, I tried to understand the fact that, but they don't have right now. There's not an arts editor, so
That's correct.
it's kind of not. Do you think that's something that they are? Do you think that they're looking for someone like that, or is it because of you mentioned online? I mean, I don't have a computer. I love the paper. I love books. I love magazines. I don't go online.
Absolutely.
Is that a lot of part of the problem? Is that you can get so much of that arts and entertainment information on the internet now, international and local, that maybe it's not as important.
I don't necessarily think the internet has to do with it. I know I can't speak a lot about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't expect it. It's not your problem.
It's a little bit beyond my pay grade, the
Right.
problem that they're going through. But they were looking for an arts editor
Right.
for a long time. I believe that has kind of tailed off. I'm not sure if they were getting. I wasn't part of the hiring process,
no,
obviously.
of course not.
But in terms of why things went the way they did, I can tell you that a lot of people within the Banner weren't really happy when they moved to that mixed arts section between the Berkshire Eagle and the Bennington Banner. There were a lot of people within the Banner who weren't thrilled with that. They kind of thought Bennington was getting maybe one story in that,
I'm so
if
glad
that.
to hear that, and that it wasn't just people reading the Banner. There were people within the Banner too. Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
that was not a decision that everyone was happy with, but
right.
at the same time, it was a decision that was made, and we had to
You
go
have
with
to go
it.
by it. Yeah.
So, that being said, you mentioned online,
yeah.
because honestly, I think there is a gap there. You can get lots of national entertainment news online, but that local news, reviews of Oldcastle plays, for example, write-ups of Sage City Symphony, things that are happening in Bennington. We're really the only ones
Right.
who are doing that,
Right.
and I'm the education editor,
Yes,
or
I know.
not editor. Sorry, wow, I was
you
giving
do a
myself.
great job too. In fact, you have an article on the front page of the Banner. We're taping today on February 20th. You have a BSD article in there.
Yep, and that'll be the first of a series of articles. I'm doing one for every district: BSD, Shaftesbury.
Oh, great.
I wrote Woodford. I'm not sure if it made it into the paper yet,
Oh,
but
okay. I taught in Pownell for
Yep, Pownell.
29 years.
As the education reporter, and I also am the one covering Shaftesbury, Woodford, North Bennington, I have a very large beat.
Yeah.
But I always try, when I can, to make. Like, I made it to Oldcastle for the kids at the Southshire School. We're putting on their play.
I remember.
I was able to get out there for that.
Right.
I got to Sage City's last performance, which was an excellent performance. But it's hard that we don't have someone who their job is to cover the arts. So I understand what you're saying, and it would be great if we could get someone.
Right. Well, you mentioned Oldcastle. I mean, I'm not. I mean, yes, I've been with Oldcastle since 1987, but it's not. I mean, I was just surprised that even Williams Theater Festival.
Yep.
No reviews, nothing. Great Barrington, Dorset, Weston, all the different places. It just, But I know that that's not part of the Berkshire. What do they call it? What is it called? Arts
Berkshire's
Center.
Week.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Yeah, and I can't really say why. That all of those towns are in the Berkshire Eagles coverage area. They've been recently. It's been a little unclear who's covering Pownell. That's
okay.
That's always been under our purview.
Right.
But recently, they have sort of stepped up and said that they would take Pownell. But I'm not really sure of what news has been coming out of there since I've never covered Pownell.
Right.
So there are changes going on within the four papers that are part of New England Newspapers Incorporated.
It's
the Berkshire
Banner, Berkshire Eagle,
the Manchester Journal, and the Brattleboro Reformer. Our editor, Michelle Karras, is now the editor of both the Reformer and the Banner.
Keeps her busy.
Yes, so she's been split between the two recently. The Manchester Journal's offices are up for sale. There's a lot of, no one really knows what is going on right now.
Right.
So all that will sort itself out. Hopefully we can get an arts and entertainment editor, because
That would be great.
that's something that we've been missing even since Jack McManus, who held that position before, ended up going down to New Haven. He is now one of the people who actually lays out the paper. We submit all the stories to them and tell them what we want on what pages and things like that. That's part of the new system, so he's down there doing that now. But it has been a loss.
Yeah. Well, and another thing, I mentioned this to Derek before. I mean, I don't like to complain on this show or anything, but when Oldcastle did Bennington Goes to War this past year after the regular season, it was a great success. People loved it, and the Banner played a very integral part in this play. The publisher and a columnist, and it took place during World War II, but to my knowledge, nobody from the banner, and I don't care about a review, but nobody came, as far as I know, to see the show. And I just thought they've got to know. There's been press releases and different things like that. Somebody must have known that this was going on. I didn't expect, I know there's been no reviews for anything, and I can understand that, but it was just something I didn't understand, that people didn't show up for this, because it was a very important part of the play.
Yeah, and I can't speak too much on
I know you can't.
to why we will cover certain things over certain other things.
Right.
But the reality is we don't have a very large staff.
I know you don't.
Right.
How many reporters are there, by the way?
Well, as of this week,
Seems like
3.
Yeah, I was gonna
As of
say.
next week, 2. Tom Momberg, actually, who has been with us for about a year now, is moving to New York City, where he got a job with a paper there.
Oh, you're going to be even busier.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were going to have a reporter. We had a reporter lined up to come fill a position. He was going to cover more of the North Shires area.
Okay.
That, for some reason, I don't know,
Yeah.
did not work out. So now we're looking to fill that position again. It really is an interesting time at the Banner.
Right. Now, I know one reason you were able to be here today is your day off. Are you there like 6 days a week, or are the weekends?
I'm there 5 days a week.
5 days a
Sunday,
week.
I'm there Sunday through Thursday.
Oh, okay.
And Tom actually had previously been Tuesday through Saturday.
Oh,
and then
okay.
Keith Whitcomb is the regular business week.
Right.
So we had everything covered, and then one person on Saturday and one person on Sunday. Keith recently has picked up some editorial duties. He's now working Sunday through Thursday. So with Tom leaving, I'm not sure if that schedule will stay the same, and who will pick up. Last time, before we hired Tom, no one was really covering the Hoosick Falls area after another one of our reporters had left. So perhaps we'll be in a time where we have to focus less on Hoosick Falls and Cambridge. But it's hard to tell.
It's not your job. Isn't none of you do the sports? So who does?
No. Sorry. Sport.
Who's in charge of sports
sorry.
now? I can't remember.
This whole time I've been speaking about the newsroom. Sports is Adam Samrov
Okay.
is the editor,
All right.
and Jeff Smith is the assistant editor. But their work always gets praised. The two of them do very good work in the sports department.
Yeah. I'm not really much into sports. The only time I really am interested in looking at sports is when one of the big tennis, like the French Open,
Yep.
or I like to watch tennis. So that's about the only. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, that's about the only time I look. Or if somebody's son or daughter or nephew or somebody has been in the Banner, and they say, "Oh, did you see the picture and read the story about?" Then of course, I want to see it. Now. I'm assuming that most of the jobs you go on are assigned to you, or are there some too that you go looking for?
Well, Michelle will sometimes assign us stories, but for the most part, we as reporters have a lot of leeway in deciding what we can do. That being said, that's limited. If I promise someone I'll be somewhere,
Right.
I try to stick to that.
Right.
So if someone else tells me a week later that they're doing an event at the same time, I have to say, I'm sorry,
Right.
send us a picture, we'll do our best to get it in, but I can't be there.
Right.
A lot of all of our schedules are meetings. Just the SVSU, they have their policy committee meeting, the SVSU, MAU, all of the individual
Right.
districts. That can take up a lot of
That
time.
takes up a lot. Yeah.
And I try to make it to any schools with it in our coverage area. That includes, I make it up to Manchester sometimes. The Maple Street School is an independent school up there.
Right.
I go and visit them, but I pretty much will seek out, and at this point all of the schools know to just send things directly to me, and I'll do my best to cover them.
Are you limited to how much space, or does it depend upon the story itself? I mean, is it your column can only be such a length, or?
Well, that's a good question, and it does depend on the story. We measure it in, if it were a single column in the newspaper, how many inches it would be. Typically, we try to keep it around 15 inches. Any more than that, it can cause space problems.
Okay.
But for major stories, for example, the one that's in the paper today about the Bennington School District
Right.
budget, that I think is about 25 inches. It's something that there's a lot of information about, and all the information is important. I just wrote today, I know it's my day off, but I offered to write the story of the fluoride forum that was last night. So that can get in tomorrow's paper rather than Monday's, which is if I had written it on Sunday, which is the next day I work. That's about a 30-inch story. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's a very controversial topic that people want to read about.
Yeah, but how do you fluoride, fluoride. You write a story about fluoride, and then it continues on and on and on. How do you keep the story that you're writing fresh, so that it doesn't sound like, oh, he's just repeating the same stuff over and over? I mean, that's got to be a really hard job.
That can be very difficult, and it's something that comes up a lot, because honestly, there are very few things, especially in town politics, that it happens one day and then it's over. The best example, it's been going, one of the first stories I ever covered, and it's still ongoing, the debate about Shaftesbury's town garage.
Oh, right.
That's, for a long period of time, it was most of what was being discussed at select board meetings, and I've got to write stories about those meetings, but I can't make it sound like the same thing every time.
How often can you write about the garage, right?
Exactly. So it's finding different angles to cover the story. Fluoride, I actually haven't written that much about fluoride. Most of the content has been in the form of letters to the editor, guest columns, that type of thing. I've covered the 2 fluoride forums, and I did an interview before they actually went to the select board. The Oral Health Coalition came into the banner and said, we've been doing this research, we want to talk about it. So I interviewed them. So it's really just finding different voices, because you can quote the same people time and time again, but that's not doing a service to your readers.
Do you do a lot of research yourself? I mean, with all this stuff that's going on fluoride, you probably have your reasoning why you're for or against it. I'm not asking you that, but do you go out and try to do as much research on fluoride as you can, so that you're understanding both sides of the story?
Yes.
That's probably difficult if you feel one way or the other.
Well,
it's like on the news. They have to be very careful when they're reporting the news that they're not favoring.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of good points in that question. I absolutely do research into everything I'm covering. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you're on a deadline and you just got this quote in. You have an hour to write the story.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to.
I'm sure you have to be pretty fast sometimes.
Yeah, so sometimes you're working under pressure, but sometimes you have all day or a couple days. We try to turn around stories as quickly as possible, but some stories really demand more research. I try and learn as much as I can about people before I interview them. It sounds silly, but we Google them. We see if they have their own personal website, if they have a profile on their company website, things like that. Just you arm yourself with as much information as you can before you go into the interview. And when you're talking about a complicated subject like fluoride, it would be pretty easy to just, this person says this, and quote it. But I don't like to do that. I like to have some context as to what they're saying. And I always make sure it's really difficult.
I'm sure.
But you shouldn't, you do as much as you can to keep your own opinions out of the paper.
It's got to be hard.
Because I'm a news reporter. I'm not a columnist. People aren't picking up the paper to read my opinions.
Right.
They're picking up the paper to read the news.
Get information.
But I like to have a knowledgeable opinion about anything I'm writing about, just so I can decide which quotes to put in. I tend to let the experts speak for themselves. They don't need me to translate their words. But I like to have that background information.
Sometimes, and I found this years ago, or not years ago, but I do a play, and there'd be a review in the paper, wherever it is, and the headline would say one thing, but the article was a little bit different than what the headline might make you think that this play wasn't worthwhile. But then you would read the review and say, why did they put that headline in there? Are you responsible for your headline, or is your editor, or who is responsible for the headline on your stories?
We typically will write in a suggested headline
okay.
that sometimes they will use and sometimes they will not.
Okay.
Because we as the reporters have no way of knowing sometimes if the story will be on one side of the paper, it'll have a ton of room for the headline, where if it's on the other side, maybe it'll have to be 2 or 3 words.
Oh, okay.
So we write what we think the headline should be, and it's probably 60% of the time they'll go with that headline, but sometimes it's impossible.
Now your headline today, BSDI's 2.9 cent increase.
That's a good example.
Yours?
I think I had it as something like BSD proposes 2.9 cent
okay.
increase. So that's a very small change,
Yeah.
but sometimes they'll have to scrap it and go with something. And I
Right.
think that's where you get, the editors will read over the story once or twice maybe, but they might not have a thorough understanding of all the background. Like you mentioned, that research that you do beforehand, or with the tax increases, that's a really complicated formula. So if I say something like, well, the common level of appraisal in Bennington went down, which means this for the tax rate, they will try to interpret that into a headline, but
Okay.
it won't necessarily always be perfect.
All right, right. So did you Google me?
I
Before
did,
you came
so
here?
You're the interviewer.
Okay. Now, so am I okay as an interviewer?
No, yeah, you're
Am I all right?
you're doing
Am
great.
Am I okay? Okay, all right. Another thing I was wondering about too was your work schedule. I mean, are you at are you there at the Banner, and then all of a sudden? Do you have a schedule for the day? I mean, when you walk in, do they say, okay, here's the schedule, get your story, or write a story from 9 to 10:30 or whatever, and then we want you to go out at 11 o'clock to cover. I mean, do you have a set schedule, or are you pretty much, you can work on your own? I mean, you're not, well, maybe you can do some work at home too, I'm sure. If you're doing research and
sure.
stuff.
Sometimes I'll work at home. I like to be in the office just in case something like an accident happens and they need someone to go out and take a photo or something like that. I like to be in there just so I'm available. But for the most part, I set my own schedule.
There's not that big sound of the old-fashioned
No.
typewriters, though, is there?
No, there's no
I
typewriters.
think of the old movies, Front Page and stuff like that. All that, it always sounded so busy, and the clicking and clacking. And
Yeah,
all that
no.
stuff.
When I first went into the Banner newsroom,
pretty
I was
quiet.
expecting guys with the hats, with the
Right,
note
right,
card
with
and the
little green
cigars,
visors,
and
sure.
yeah, and that wasn't what it was like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no typewriters. But for the most part, I completely make my own schedule. I'll check in with the editors. They'll say, "What stories do you think you'll have for the day?" And I say, "Well, I'm working on this, this, and this." But for the most part, my day, if you're interested, I think
it's interesting the day in the life of a reporter.
I'll go in on average probably around noon, just because so many late nights.
You're there. Oh, okay.
And
That's because of meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah, meetings, things like that.
And they go,
Yeah,
okay.
they like to have our stories submitted by around 5:30, which can be tough. For example, with the fluoride forum last night, in the past we had until like an absolute deadline of 9:30, but now with the new system where we have to send everything down to New Haven, they want everything earlier, which has been really hard on sports. I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah, sure.
But again, that's just the way it is, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reporters just have to deal with it. But so I'll go in at around noon, check my email. I like for people to tell me if something's going on that day, for it to be a week or so in advance.
Right,
Doesn't
yeah.
always
That'd be
happen.
nice to know, yeah.
Sometimes I'll get a surprise. Something's happening at the school today at noon. Can you come? Sure. I'll go right away. But I know, say, for example, that I'm going to the Shaftesbury Select Board meeting at 6:30. So I'll block off 6 until 9 to be there. And I'll say, well, that means I have to have my stories done earlier. So that's, it really depends on the day. Sometimes I'll have to drive up to Manchester at 8 in the morning, and I'll do that. And at that same night, cover something until 9 p.m., a school board meeting. So we have to be flexible, and we have to be willing to change our schedule at the drop of a dime.
Yeah. Are there stories that have been going on in Bennington that you would like to cover that you haven't covered yet? Is there anything that or something
Well-
of interest to you? I don't know. What are some of your interests besides writing? Do you have other interests in your life?
Well, this doesn't really help me. I'm a huge baseball fan.
Oh, okay.
I've taken courses on sabermetrics and studying the statistics of baseball and things like that. So I'm kind of a stats guy, and I love analyzing baseball. But that doesn't really help me in terms of what interests me in the
Well, no,
community.
but could you write articles about that? I mean, could you
The-
submit
the-
something like for the Banner for them to put it
Yeah,
in?
the sports department has actually invited me to write columns about baseball
Oh, good. Well, since you're
statistics.
so interested,
We said once the baseball season gets going, we'll
Yeah.
reconsider
that's
that more.
great.
But yeah,
That's great.
that would be fun.
Yeah.
I actually write a blog about
Oh.
baseball statistics and things like that.
Oh, God, they should get you.
So I do that in my spare
WBTN
time.
has a, what's that name of that show they do, a sports show? They used to do it on Tuesday nights. I got to get you on there. Huh?
Well, I'm always willing to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
guest
I know-
appearances.
I can't remember the name of the show, but yeah.
But in terms of other things going on in the community right now, that's hard. We keep our ear to the ground, but we sometimes just don't have time. If something's a little nebulous, we're not really sure what's going to happen. Sometimes stuff like that will get pushed by the wayside with immediate news
Yeah.
that's happening. One thing that's interesting that I'm planning on writing a story about that I haven't yet is at the village school in North Bennington and at the high school. Those are two schools that I've talked to about it. They have foreign exchange students there right now, and I think there's 4 or 5 at the high school, and it's interesting. And I'm hoping to get to interview some of them and write about what the experience is of a foreign exchange student in Bennington. That's one that's on the back burner right now.
Something you should think about. The Rotary has a speech contest every year in March, and students from the high school they write they have to follow the four-way rule for the contest that the Rotaries follows, and usually there's at least 1 or 2 foreign exchange students that write a story that breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Like they've been in this war-torn area and they've seen their neighbors or their families being killed. I mean, it is touching. I mean, that would be a really, I'm not sure when it's going to be this year, but it's always been like, I don't know, March in the 20s or something like that. But
Yeah, I
that would be
remember it
something
happened last year.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing. I judged for quite a few years. I didn't do it last year though. Do you ever go to Michelle? Sorry, Michelle, I don't really know you, but I always thought it said Cardis. It's Caris?
Caris, yep.
Caris, okay. Do you ever go to Michelle and say, could I cover this article can you go to her and make a suggestion of something you want to do and see if she will agree to doing that? Or
Yeah, she's generally really supportive when the reporters have their own idea. We have a very free and loose newsroom where we are encouraged to do that sort of thing, to find our stories, find things that interest us, and find things that will make a good paper. And she's always very supportive. And there have been times where I've said, hey, I'm interested in covering this, and she'll send me some background information from the state and things like that I now don't have to look up. And we all share press releases with each other. We don't step on each other's toes at all. It's a really good environment to work in.
what papers do you read?
Well,
Do
online.
you have time? Oh, online, of course. Yes, okay.
I suppose I fit into the millennial generation. I don't usually self-identify as that, but I do get most of my news online.
Right.
The New York Times online is one of my favorites. To be honest, though, where I get most of my news is the Associated Press. We get a subscription to their wire.
Oh, okay.
So whenever I'm looking for news, I will just log into the AP Newswire, and I'll get the news before it's published in other places. So that's usually where I get my news.
What are we going to do without Jon Stewart?
I
He's leaving.
I
depended on him for so much of my news.
I love Jon Stewart. The Daily Show is amazing.
He's going to be missed.
And I love Stephen Colbert as well.
Oh, I know,
thought
they both.
thought his brand of satire was very
right on.
right on. And
For those that don't know, on Comedy Central, their Daily Show with Jon Stewart, he's leaving very soon, and Stephen Colbert always followed him. He is left now. He's going to be taking over for David Letterman when he leaves his show. So it's sad. I know my sister-in-law and her husband. I mean, I'm going to have to send them a sympathy card the last when Jon Stewart leaves, because that's their before dinner. They sit down and they watch. They was always Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart,
Yep.
and then they would have dinner. Dinner would be cooking while they were sitting there watching the show, and they're really going to miss them. So you said you go in at noon and you might be there. Okay, you might be there very late. Now, but today is your day off, and yet you are doing some work today.
Right. We try to work roughly 40-hour weeks. Usually it's more than that, but...
Well, I think it's the same thing with Beck here. I mean, I think she has a certain number of hours, but she's here more than she needs to be.
You work as long as you need to work to get your job done, which sometimes can lead to some 13, 14-hour days.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we don't really complain about it. Most of us who are there at the Banner now really love what we do. So it's not really, for me at least, it's not really a problem.
Yeah. When you said that by the inches or something like that, I'm not thinking of 50 Shades of Grey, folks. You don't get paid by, do you get paid by the inches,
No.
by how do you get paid as a require? I'm not asking you how much you get paid, but do you get paid for each article, or do you get a?
No, it's we have set salaries. Okay. It's technically an hourly position, but we work exactly 40 hours every week, and we are encouraged not to do overtime.
Well,
we have to make it work. But we are expected to submit 2 stories a day. This is not a hard and fast rule, but it's rough. And when we only have 2 reporters versus 3, it's even more necessary because we like to have 4 local stories on the front page.
Right.
Because it's the Bennington Banner.
Right. That's right. That's what I want to see.
we acknowledge that people can go to a lot of different places to get their national news, but there's really only one place they can go to get news from Bennington. Mm-hmm. So it's our responsibility to put those stories out. But when there's only 2 reporters working, that can be very difficult. Even when there's 3, sometimes someone, you were expecting that you were going to write these 2 stories today, but it was a snow day at school, so now you can't go in and interview the class you were planning on it.
There's been plenty of those.
And sometimes you have backup stories to work on, and sometimes you don't. This is February vacation week for me. This was a rough week for an education reporter.
Sure. Right.
Luckily, I just got yesterday the copies of all the district's annual reports, which includes their projected tax increase, all sorts of good stuff. And like I said, I'm a numbers guy, and there's some good numbers in there.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you're a numbers guy, I mean, it works out nicely for you.
So I try and I read those reports, which are 50-ish page reports, and then put that into a story. But that's a story that I can do anytime between now and town meeting. So it's good to have those on the back burner in case something that I was working on doesn't end up falling through for that day.
Now, all these town meetings.
Yeah.
2 people are not going to be able to get to all of the town meetings. So how are you?
You're
going to have to figure something out there.
That's going to be a difficult one.
Yeah.
I believe what we did last year, I went to Bennington for the beginning part where the CDC and MAU and SVSU and BSD did their reports at the firehouse. Then Michelle actually came and relieved me for the Bennington town meeting while I went to Shaftesbury. It's all hands on deck.
So she doesn't mind getting her hands dirty once in a while. If need be, she will go out and she will do some of this reporting herself.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't happen often, but on town meeting day, that's a 12-hour day for everyone basically, and we get pizza at the office. And the next day the election results is almost just as bad because we have election results. The polls close at 7 just about everywhere, so we're not getting those results until probably 8 or 9, depending on the town. So that's a night that the deadline is typically pushed back to around 9:30 or 10, and we get in whatever we can, and we put the rest online. That's a hectic night.
Is the Banner looking for a 3rd reporter, or you look like it's going to be you 2 for a while?
Well, we were looking for a 4th reporter before this. We only learned that Tom would be leaving in the last week. I don't know I assume we're going to be at 2 for at least a little while, I have to believe. I don't know what the
Right,
status on
of course
hiring that third guy is, and I don't know if then we're going to look for a fourth or if we're going to live with three again. That's a lot of decisions that are made well
Right.
above me.
Being a Luddite, I mean, I'm scared to death that newspapers are going, magazines, books are going to disappear. Now, I'm hoping not within my lifetime, because I got too many books ahead of me to read.
Yeah.
My house is just full of books. But is that something that, how far in the future do you think it will be before everything is online? And those of us who are stupid about computers and stuff, or don't have the interest in getting involved in that, I mean, you know, how long do you think? Do you have an idea?
That's understandable, and a lot of people feel that way. Even I like that our paper is available online because it makes it really easy when I say need to search for something.
Yeah, right, of course.
Something that I wrote a few
No,
months
I can
ago.
understand that.
It's easy, but I read the physical paper.
Yeah.
How long? That it's really hard to tell because you're even seeing with books now, e-readers, Kindles, that type of thing.
Yeah, I know. I don't even have a Kindle.
Yeah, those are becoming really popular. And
I
now
know.
tablets like iPads, you can get newspapers on there.
I know.
So
People keep telling me you could get all the magazines you want on your iPad, Willie. You don't have to subscribe. But I like to feel the book, the pages. I like to smell the books. You know, even the old books, whatever. So I don't know.
I just a couple weeks ago made my stop to the Bennington Library. I took out some books.
Yeah.
I do have a Kindle. I don't use it that much. I usually stick with the regular books.
No, they're after me all the time here at Cat TV. Everybody's after me. You know, if you're not going to get a computer, at least get a smartphone, do this or do that. But I don't know. I just keep resisting. Are there, well, first off, before I do that, what are your thoughts on Brian Williams, the NBC Nightly News?
Well, what a mess.
It is a mess. I see. I want the guy to have another chance. I mean, that's me. I think I like Brian Williams. I think I love him on Dave Letterman. He's absolutely hysterical. I know he did a bad thing. I just wish he could be excused for it. But it seems like now, I don't know how there's going to be a chance for him to survive.
Yeah, I'm never really in the business of wanting to like crucify individual
No,
careers.
I don't either. I don't like
I
it.
think, and I even think his problem is a symptom of a bigger problem. The cable news and just TV news in general has been pushed so far in the entertainment direction, and we saw it recently with the Quantum Leap students at MAU responding to Fox News, the Waters World segment about Bennington.
Right.
If you watched Waters' response to their response, it was effectively that he's a satire guy. It's why would they judge him by journalism ethics?
Right.
And that line is so blurred. What is the O'Reilly Factor? Is it a news show? Is it a commentary show? Is it, I don't know. And I feel like for a lot of people who are considered traditional news correspondents but are on CNN or NBC or any of the networks, it's not just Fox. I don't mean to single them out.
No.
Often they will do and say the things that get them the ratings.
Yeah.
And that's honestly why in college I stuck with newspaper journalism. It's not to say newspapers aren't going to be a little sensationalistic from time to time, but in general, we don't have the temptation to do that very often. We have our subscribers, and we could lose subscribers, but I honestly think if we start putting falsehoods in the paper, we're going to lose a lot more subscribers.
That's right.
So it just seems like the journalism industry, the newspaper industry is much more grounded in it's our job to get out the facts rather than it's our job to keep people entertained after dinner. Right.
I know a lot of people feel, you said there's so much entertainment in the news. I know I'm an entertainment and celebrity slut. I mean, I can't help it. I have been since I was a kid. And I know a lot of people complain about the Today Show. They complain about Good Morning America. And a lot of people I know have been switching over and watching CBS Morning because it's more grounded in the news. There's not quite as much about the entertainment. And I have to admit, I enjoy watching the Today Show and Good Morning America. Switch back and forth. I like the entertainment part of it, but I do. Now, Bill O'Reilly, I must say, I don't always agree with Mr. O'Reilly, but he I don't know where he was talking about the Brian Williams debacle, and he actually said that this idea that people want to go out and slaughter people, just get whatever dirt they can. He said, I wish they would leave the man alone and just, deal with this the way they have to. And I think he was more or less saying that he give him another chance. So I thought, wow, I'm surprised. I mean, a lot of people have been given second chances. So I hope he gets it, but he probably won't. Are there people that are living or dead that you wish you would like to be able to interview? I wrote down if I could interview, and some of these people are alive, some of it passed on. Stephen King, because I'm a big fan of Stephen King.
Absolutely.
Judy Garland, because I thought she was a legend. Audrey Hepburn, because I thought she was absolutely stunning. Marilyn Monroe, because, oh, what a life, what a life. And Andy Cohen, the Watch What Happens Live, which is on Bravo, and actor Gail Garcia Bernal. Those are some people I would love to, living or dead, to have them sitting here and be able to talk to them. Are there people that you think that, a lot of people say, oh, I wish I could sit down and sit with Christ, or I could sit down and talk with, see, again, I'm the celebrity slut person. That's who I want to.
Sure,
that's who I want to sit down and talk to.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. But
well, I don't know, but I'm sure. I mean, being a mathematician, maybe there are people that. Oh, there was another thing I wanted to say about that too. Oh well. Did you? Yeah, I'll go back. Sorry, I seem to go back and forth once in a while. But as far as math, if you hadn't gone into writing, do you think you would have done something with math?
I don't think so. Well, if anyone would ever pay me to do baseball statistical analysis, that would be fantastic. But I think having a journalism background is good for that. So I don't think I could ever do pure math. I love Excel spreadsheets. I do a lot with them. I don't think I could ever do accounting or work in a finance office or anything like that. It's just
like the numbers.
Yeah.
Did you have those boxes of baseball cards?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Yeah.
Still do. Absolutely.
Do they still have the bubble gum baseball cards? I don't even know if they still have those.
Some of them. I think some Topps packs will still have bubble gum, but not often. Yeah.
I know a lot of my friends who.
It's not very good gum.
Oh, that's it. People would collect that, but they wouldn't eat the gum. Who wanted the gum? But no, they enjoyed the cards. No, they didn't want the gums. All right. So I'll go back now that I'm giving you a chance. Are there people that you would like to, or maybe even in the vicinity, or somebody you haven't talked to, or I don't know, any?
Well,
what would you ask them?
I think in terms of being a journalist, the two people who I would like to interview in that career would be Woodward and Bernstein.
Yeah.
Just their experiences in investigating the Watergate scandal, all of that, I would love to hear. And could these interviews be off the record? That's another question.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sure.
Because that's a big concern for me. But
I
would like to hear what they went through and what they had to do. Because really, when you're in journalism school, you learn all about them. You look up to them. They are the prime example of what a journalist should be, for better or for worse. In terms of just anyone I could interview,
going back,
many.
You must have seen All the President's Men.
Oh, yes.
Do you feel that was a good, honest look at their lives and how they handled that whole Watergate business and everything? Or was it too glamorized?
It was definitely glamorized.
Robert Redford and...
who does Dustin Hoffman?
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman.
It absolutely glorified the journalism industry to a degree, but a lot of their newsroom reminds me of my newsroom. Not quite as many people and not quite as much hustle and bustle, but...
And there was clickety-clacking.
There was lots of clickety-clacking. I do think it's based on my experiences, which as a journalist in Bennington,
right.
I see similarities between the work they did and the work I do, as was depicted in All the President's Men.
Right.
A little flashier. Of the meetings down in the parking garage did happen, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, you'd have to meet in the Shaftesbury garage, I think. So.
Well, if they get one, I will definitely set up meetings there. But yeah, if I could interview anyone. There's so many interesting people. Just to be able to sit down in a room, even with someone you hate, for example, but you just want to know that Hitler is a great example.
Yeah.
If you could sit down with Hitler and say, why did you do the things you do?
Yeah.
That, on the other hand, someone like Dr. Martin Luther King, the ability to interview them, hear their thoughts. You always hear what other people thought of Dr. King, but
right.
just from his mouth. It would be really interesting.
Well, what would you ask him? I know, I'm putting you on the spot again.
Assuming
one
question
you would ask
I would
him.
say, what do you think of where we are today? I would be fascinated to hear his answer to that question.
Yeah, I think he might be a little disappointed. I don't know.
Yeah, because we've definitely made progress, but
Oh, yes. But
at the same time.
Yeah, I hate these stories that get, I don't know, they just get so, I don't know. I have trouble watching the news now on television. Channel 6, 10, 13, it seems like every night someone has been knifed, someone has been murdered, somebody has been shot. Every freaking night there is some kind of awful thing that has happened. Or like a baby, the child has been killed, the guy who just killed his nephew or son or whatever with a baseball bat. I mean, I get so tired of hearing the news. And that's one of the things that I would love to see in the Banner more often is good pieces about what's going on in town. We read about the fluoride, we read about the school. I mean, there are good things that are going on, and I just wish there was a reporter that was their only job, to go out and find happy stories.
Yeah.
But I get so tired of. I can't watch the news in the evening anymore, the local news. I just there's too much going on.
And you're not alone, trust me. Even the things that you get frustrated with reading, we get frustrated with writing.
No, I'm sure.
Fluoride, we've covered ad nauseum at this point.
Cat TV has too.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely.
Negative and pro. I mean, pro and con.
Yeah, absolutely. And the court stories, if there's too much of a delay in writing about a particular story, we'll start hearing it on Facebook. Well, why haven't you written about the accident that happened over on Gage Street last night?
Right.
Even that. So it's not an option for us to not cover those things. But myself, I was covering the emerging leaders at MAU. They walk around the downtown and interview business owners. Beforehand, I got there a little bit early, and they used me as a practice interview.
Oh.
And they asked me what was my favorite story to cover. And I didn't really have an answer for them. I write 2 stories a day for the last over a year now. But I said my favorite stories in general are the ones where I get to go into a classroom and see what the kids are doing.
Yeah, that's great.
They're Skyping with people in Egypt. They're doing any number of interesting things, science projects, math projects. A group of kids met the lieutenant governor recently to learn about, they designed a town and they formed a planning commission and had zoning rules.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And just learning what the kids are doing and seeing their creativity, those are my favorite stories to write.
But you don't have the time. I mean, there's so many other stories
Yeah,
that you have to cover before you can...
I'm responsible for covering other stories. And then it's almost like those stories when there's time. And I do wish that it didn't have to be that way, but with a small paper and a small staff, we don't really have a choice.
Of course, you know, I was sitting here complaining about the arts and entertainment, or saying that I wished it was different. And yet when I read in the paper, let's see, there was somebody, and nothing against the letters that were into the paper, but somebody saying, oh, the crossword puzzle is too easy now. And I thought, oh, jeez. Then someone said, oh, you took away my favorite cartoon strips and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. And then I'm thinking, well, all right, I was complaining. I shouldn't be against those people if that's how they feel. I mean, yeah, I have ways, certain things that I feel about things that happen with the Banner. Now, do people, I usually you give your number or your at the end of your?
Yeah, we give our number and our email address.
Do you get a lot of people calling you and say, "Hey, thank you," or are most of them like, you could have done a different angle, or you didn't quote me properly?
It's probably 50-50. Okay. We all get the negative ones, and it can be any number of things. From if there's an inaccuracy in the article, we're happy to fix it.
Right. Yeah.
That's our mistake. Sometimes it'll be, my brother was arrested and you wrote about it. How dare you?
Yes,
and,
I've seen that. Yeah, yeah.
And in that case, there's nothing we can do really, or you didn't tell his side of the story enough.
Right.
And we try to do the best we can.
That's a hard job.
Yeah, we're often put between one person who's saying one thing, one who's saying another, and you're not going to satisfy both sides.
No, again,
it's impossible.
you can't take sides. I mean, it's got to be so hard to sit down and start. Now, when I was a kid and the teacher assigned, you're going to have to write a paragraph and such a thing, and I think, I don't feel like writing today. And when I was teaching, there were kids that I knew just did not want to write that day, and I didn't always make them write something if that child just couldn't. Do you have that kind of a feeling? You sit down at the typewriter,
at the computer,
and you just think, oh God, where am I going to start? I've written about this so many times, I just don't know where to.
Absolutely. There have been times where I've sat there for half an hour just staring at the screen, not figuring out how to start the story. So sometimes what we do then is I'll just jump to the middle of the story, just start writing down some of the facts, and then I'll have an idea of where the story is going. So maybe then I can go back and write the beginning. So that's just a technique we use sometimes.
Now, if you do sit down and start writing a book, I mean, you said that you've written some of these 50,000 word pieces.
Yeah.
What kind of a subject? What would would you like to do historical fiction, or what kind of a book would you write?
I've said before, if I were to write a book, it would be probably historical fiction or science fiction.
Right. Oh,
something
science fiction
something
too,
in the past or the future, one or the other. I'm really interested in. I have a lot of Isaac Asimov is one of my favorite authors. Several others.
Okay.
Just the way they look at society, and they use their work of fiction to talk about society, and to some degree look at how society is today. I think that's fascinating. I love reading things like that. I'm reading Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series right now, and it's very.
I'm surprised you hadn't read it before.
That's one that it's been on my list for a very long time. But it's whimsical and very silly. But at the same time, a lot of the observations about modern society are very pointed.
Yeah.
So I'd love to be able to write things like that.
My nephews loved Terry Pratchett. I think is that his
Terry
name?
Pratchett.
Oh my God, they were crazy about Terry Pratchett. Well, I know we're coming to the end of the show here, and I just have to thank you for being so honest, so open, and answering all of my questions and not hemming or hawing. It's been really interesting. I know I appreciate the work that you do. I know it's not easy, but it's something that you just have to be praised for doing this kind of work. And I know it's got to be hard. You know, pros and cons of writing and everything. But I wish the Banner success. I hope you get more reporters so that you're not going to be so wrung out. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And
it was an honor.
And if you want to read any more of my stuff, you can go to BenningtonBanner.com, or you can follow me on Twitter. My tag is Derek Carson BB.
BB. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for watching Your Friends and Neighbors. This is it for this show. We'll have another show coming up as soon as we can get another one in the can, okay? So keep warm, and sorry about those oil bills. Take it easy, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
I take a long look around, I have to say, this time of year, it becomes clear, those you hold dear, you draw them near, this time of day.